Welcome to Mindful Talk, brief conversations about mindfulness in the workplace and at home. I am your host, Lauren Wessinger.
And I'm your host, Misti Anderson. And this podcast is brought to you by the Mindful Project.
The Mindful Project helps you elevate the culture of your business by bringing mindfulness practice to you and your staff through in-person and virtual learning. Contact us through our website, themindfulproject.co, for more information. Hey, listeners, welcome back to the podcast. This week, Misti and I are here to talk about the power of silence in a very, very noisy world. Hi, Misti.
Hi, Lauren. Thanks for coming and chatting with me. I love silence.
That phrase, the silence is deafening, can be so true too, right? I'm with you. I love silence. And then sometimes it's like, wow, the silence is really potent, you know?
Oh, I work in a library. Don't forget. And I'm the only employee. So there are sometimes, for the most part, I love it. But there are sometimes I'm like, wow, like I hear everything right now.
Is there anyone there with you now or no?
No, it's just me. I usually record before we open in the morning.
Nice.
Yeah, just me and the books and the fish.
And the fish. How many people come in like at any given point during the day?
We have about, 50 patrons a day.
Nice. That's a lot.
Total. Sometimes it gets, really rushy after school. Of course, all like the junior high, sixth graders come in and they do their little mingling and it's cute. It's like I foster like the after school hangout.
I love it.
But yeah, it's a small library, so we don't have a lot of patrons. But in the summertime, we have around 100, but a lot of those are tourists that are coming to see the building.
Yes.
Yeah.
I love
but it is everyone says when they come how much they love the silence and how much they love the quiet. And outside, we have like dirt roads and stuff and louder vehicle trucks and things like that. And so when you come in, it's like a nice little sealed off bubble. Yeah. And I think it's what you said. The world outside is so busy and so loud, and it's very rare. I mean, we listen to podcasts, we, listen to audiobooks when we're in the car, we're talking to someone in the car because we're calling them on Bluetooth, very rarely do you just, sit in the silence. And I think when people come in, they're like,
yeah, they feel it. They feel it. There's a book I'm about halfway through reading. I think maybe I've mentioned it on the podcast before, but it's called Golden. And it's two journalists who did just so much incredible research on the power of silence. And what's so interesting in this book is they talk about a number of different cases where people have had head injuries, and how they've measured their healing in a noisy environment, like in a hospital. You've been in a hospital before, how incredibly overwhelmingly noisy it is and how they're bothering you all the time instead of combining their visits. There's these beeps and alarms and nurses. And then the people who were able to have more silence healing from head injuries, and how the people in silence, because there was less input into the brain, healed like light years faster than the people who were deeply stressed out unconsciously in the nervous system from noise, which I thought was so interesting.
Wow. That's like your brain saying, I need quiet to heal.
Yes,
wow.
Totally. Because noise, everything can be in the category of noise, right? But it's something that your brain and body have to process. It's something that's coming in through your senses and you have to process it. And when there's no quiet, which happens to so many people in their lives, especially people in maybe more dangerous neighborhoods, for example, it's never quiet there. Their stress levels are higher because the body has to process that noise. It doesn't just happen in a vacuum with no effect. So interesting.
Ever since we've been doing this podcast, you have talked about being an only child and how when your house starts to vibrate and everyone gets really loud, you kind of start. So I don't ever see myself in my head as growing up an only child. I have a half brother and I had a lot of people that were in my home. But the truth is, I really was an only child. I kind of grew up that way. And you've helped me know that I'm actually not angry when all that's happening because I kind of feel angry. I'm just overstimulated. And the noise is causing me to really honestly make poor decisions, yell or be grumpy or snap at somebody. And it's really helped me to remember, like, that's not natural for my body. That's not, because there's a lot of people, like I have friends that have 6 brothers and sisters, and like, I'm serious. Like people, I'm like, how are you not going crazy right now with that noise? And so it's like kind of like your environment. And I've had to learn to remind myself, it's okay. You're not angry. This is all the things going on around you. You need to kind of step away. And I usually do have to step away, like just to kind of like balance it out. And the silence, and quite honestly, sometimes I sit in my car, because you know how your car's like perfectly still, there's no birds or anything like that. Sometimes I go and sit in the car and just shut the door, kind of get back to a place of like, okay, because kids and life and dogs and all are loud.
It's so loud. And yeah, I think that's a really important point, that, so much we know now, so much of who we are was wired in childhood,
Yeah.
everything from how we parent to how we feel in the world to our capacity for noise. I mean, everything was wired back then. And sometimes those of us who might feel more sensitive to like a lot of activity and noise, we're like, why am I so sensitive? But really, we're just overwhelmed because we didn't grow up with a bunch of activity around us, And then the people who maybe grew up with 6 brothers and sisters might be really uncomfortable alone in the quiet, right?
Yeah.
And just remembering that there's nothing wrong with you if that's you. It's just how you grew up.
Yeah.
And I like to call it a growing edge. Like I could probably increase my tolerance for noise, right? And then other people can maybe increase their tolerance for quiet and silence.
Well, like I said, I never really dug deep into why concerts have never been my jam. It's so loud and overwhelming. I remember being in college and like going to clubs and stuff and like dancing by the big speakers and being like dying, and everybody else looked like they were having fun. And now I attribute it to, you're absolutely right, I just didn't grow up in a home that was loud like that, and it still vibrates me in a different way.
Yeah.
And so silence is like really, I most of the time, do you listen to anything in the car anymore, or do you find yourself leaning into the silence in the car?
I go through phases,
Yeah.
I used to listen to music actually really loud in the car. And that was one of the things about becoming a mom that I mourned, was like, it was like my own
Your
little
rap?
club in my car.
Oh.
So I'm kind of in a place where I'm not listening to a lot of podcasts or anything right now. I'm just kind of full. I feel like full in my brain.
Yeah.
And so I'm listening to music again, and it's been really great. But I also balance that with listening to nothing. I definitely don't listen to the news anymore in the car. I used to listen to NPR every day, and I don't want to know. I find my news when I need it, where I need it, and I don't need it streaming in my ear anymore.
Yeah. I'm really glad because of where we live in the mountains, to get to the other side of the mountain, you lose complete cell service. No one can call you. You can't listen to anything. So it's like a forced silence, but it's wonderful. So I'll usually listen to like an audiobook for like 20 minutes. And then I'm like, okay, here comes my silence.
Nice.
So it's been nice to balance it, because that's really now the only time I'm in the car. But then my silence comes from work. And it's funny because I am finding, again, all back to the childhood. I think the reason I love being the library director is it's a place of serenity and silence.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I think that's a good mindful practice, right? To know, like the question you asked me about the car, if I was always listening to something in the car, can I just be quiet and silent and present instead, and just balance that out? Or, if it's always quiet around you, do you need a little lift from music or some inspiration from a podcast? It's like finding that balance. Or maybe it's not even the word balance. I'm kind of over that word. Maybe it's like meeting what's needed in the moment.
I was just about to say, how do I feel right now?
Yeah.
And that's kind of, I told you before, that's kind of how I assess my mornings. Like, what am I going to do? I used to be really regimented, like today I'm doing yoga, tomorrow I'm doing a hike. And then suddenly somewhere along the way, I broke out and I just started saying like, what do I feel like right now? And some mornings it's like, you know what? I kind of want to read and journal and drink some coffee. And that's the extent of it. And I
Mhm.
don't beat myself up about it. And I think that knowing and kind of just being open, like you said, that's a really good mindful practice.
Mhm. Yeah, right. Definitely.
So tell me, so Lauren, the reason this sparked was Lauren just recently did a silence, what do you call it? A silence retreat?
Yeah, just a silent meditation retreat for a
Oh,
week.
so cool. For a week, guys. Okay, so that whole thing sparked because I was like, I haven't heard about it yet, so I want to hear about it. So tell
Yeah.
us about it.
So I did these from home. Okay. So I did one in November of 2020, from home through Insight LA. It was all over Zoom. There was like 200 people in the retreat. And the one in November was like one of the best experiences of my life. I just couldn't wait to do it again. It was so great. Okay. This one I did like 2 weeks ago was not that. It was a lot harder. I realized November 2020, there wasn't much going on. It was during stay-at-home orders and all of that. And life is really different now. So I think that was the
Yeah.
main thing. But it was I call it a silent-ish retreat. So my kids were at school all day. I was able to do it for the most part all day and then talk to them at night. Like I wasn't totally in noble silence. And even the teachers were like, decide what silence means to you. Is it 80% quiet, 20%
Yeah.
talking? Like be realistic. Like they're really not into rigidity with these practices, which I so appreciate. They were
Me
just
too.
really, right?
I thought
They
it
were
was going to
just,
be more rigid.
yeah, they are
That's good.
so allowing and kind and compassionate and friendly. Like it's really blowing me away and kind of changing my approach to everything, how unrigid they are. I was really, really surprised and inspired. And it was hard. The meditations were hard. Some of them were 45 minutes long, many times a day. I mean, I could have sat as early as 7 in the morning until 10 o'clock at night through different practices. And they did some talks, some lectures, silent meals, walking meditation, lying down. Um, it's this is going to sound weird to somebody who's never done it. If you've done it, you'll get it. But these retreats are like up there with some of the hardest things I've ever done. I mean, it sounds like what could be hard, but
No, no. Think about all the people out there that avoid yoga just because they don't want to spend the 5 minutes
right,
on their mat where they're not doing anything.
right.
And there's a lot of people that do that because when I talk to people, they're like, oh, I can't sit still. That's and I know you hear
Yep.
that too. And so, yeah, I would totally think that I purposely haven't done one because it sounds so hard.
So
I'm
hard.
so inspired by you though, and it makes me feel really good to hear that they weren't so rigid. Because I'm bringing that to my practice and my teachings too. Is there's life is there's already rules out there and stuff. Like this is your life. Be less rigid about it and your body, and accept
Yeah.
life as it comes. Just like you were saying, like talking to my kids, that's important to me. That's now if we're yelling at each other and are breaking up fights, that's not important to me. But I like how you did
Hmm.
yours, like kind of an 80-20 almost.
Yeah, I'm finding it's exactly what you said. Like, I mean, a cornerstone of mindfulness practice is compassion. And there's not a lot of room for compassion in rigidity and control, and so and in this world, like you said, where people are so hard on themselves, we don't want to use the practice as one more way to control and be hard and judge ourselves, because that is not compassion practice. That's not mindfulness.
Yeah.
I'm teaching my first day-long meditation retreat this Sunday, and I'm so excited about it. And everyone's like pretty nervous. We're gathering in
Yeah.
person out in a farm in Weatherford, Texas, and I'm nervous because I've never taught an all-day retreat, but it's yeah, I mean, what I'm going to talk about mostly is being kind to yourself. Like what a novel, mind-blowing concept that I don't think we practice nearly enough, being kind to
Yeah.
ourselves.
I agree. Oh, I preach it in my classes nonstop. I feel like I'm preaching about it, you know, I feel like Instagram and social media in general have just changed the perception of mindfulness and meditation and yoga. And it kind of lean this way of like, wear this certain thing and sit on this certain cushion and, do it at a certain time of day. And I am really breaking free of all of that. Like a funny thing I always say is, you know what? I know a lot of yogis that would yell at me, but if you want to wear your socks in my class, you wear your socks. Like, we're breaking rules around here. And it's kind of the same thing with your mindfulness practice or your yoga practice, like you got to do what feels good for you. And probably, if I had to guess, the silence won't feel good at first, but
Right.
once you come to like learn of the benefits of the silence. And I mean, when I walk in the morning and it's so quiet, so quiet, I am the most creative I am all day. And it makes me really mad because my hands are frozen and I can't type anything. So it just has to stay in my head. And then I quickly come home and like jot some things in my journal that I thought about, but it's the silence and the being with myself. And sometimes there's times I start thinking about things that maybe don't benefit me. They don't support my well-care. I'm in a practice of telling myself, hey, hello, no, we're not talking about that. We're going to be kind to ourselves. And I'm in a practice seriously for like 2 years of internally talking to myself like my friend would, just like what you were saying, and practicing compassion and not being so rigid with myself.
Yeah. And you only get a chance to practice that because you give yourself time and space to do it. You know what I mean?
Yes.
It's like, I really feel like the solution to any problem we have is there if we just actually move our body a little bit. Like, I love that you walk in silence because we can sit in silence and kind of open up to a question, or we can move around a little bit, like take a walk without our phone. And just allow space for the answers to bubble up, because when we have our nose and our phone all the time, there is no mental space. There's no room for inspiration, for answers, for creativity, for all the wonderful things our brain can do if we're constantly distracted and have input through our ears and our eyes and even our mouth. And you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I mean, silence is not a nothing thing. Like, silence to me is a really awake and active state. It's
Yeah.
not just like sitting down and doing nothing.
No.
It's actually like, to me, silence is highly interactive, highly inspirational.
I
It's
crave silence.
not passive. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I crave silence. There's a really great feeling like when, it's really, really loud and you like close a door behind you and then it kind of goes quieter. Like, to me, that's like, but I know that bothers some people. And so if you're out there and that's you and silence is really difficult for you, I would kind of start what Lauren said, finding your little balance and seeing what bubbles up during those times of silence. And you might find that it's creativity, which is really cool because, guys, for years, like 40, I used to say that I wasn't a creative person. I am very creative. I just was always so busy and doing stuff and filling that space and that silence with other things that I didn't have room to just be creative. And that's where I really feel like I kind of like unlocked a little like, oh, okay, there's a lot of stuff in there. I just kind of like gerbil through it, and pick out the really good parts.
It's like, maybe you've heard this, like, we've become human doings instead of human beings, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so interesting. And even if you are someone who's like, I can't sit still, I can't stand the silence, I'm gonna gently and so lovingly challenge that a little bit, because while that totally is your truth and your reality, going back to that conversation about how much silence can heal the body and the brain and the nervous system, so if for any reason doing it for that, giving your nervous system a break from the constant, incessant, like unreal input that it processes. Because in that place, when the body moves down to rest and digest instead of fight or flight, only in rest and digest does any healing happen. Zero healing happens in fight or flight. And so for our longevity, we have to come to that kind of closer to the ground place, which doesn't happen when we are like stuck in the speed trap, you know?
Yeah. I think that is a wonderful way to end today, because it sounds like everyone's challenge is to find some silence. And like me, sometimes you might be in like a busy house or something and it might be really hard. Go outside. Just go outside. Nature's always your friend, or your car, if you can get in your car. But finding the silence will help you be a more mindful person. I feel like that's what it's done for me. And I hope that us sharing it today will inspire you to turn the podcast off after this. Thanks for listening, and get some silence. Thanks, you guys.
Thank you so much for listening to Mindful Talk. We don't take it lightly that you spent your time listening to our podcast, and we are forever grateful. If you'd like to support the podcast, please subscribe on your favorite podcast platform and leave us a rating and a review. Welcome to a more mindful way of living and working.